All right, what is going on, ladies and gentlemen? How is it going? I am Is There No One Else? And the video I'm bringing you today, we are going to do a class tier list for solo PvP for the Champion Point campaign. Now, the reason I'm doing this and the reason I'm going back against my word that I had on a video I did about a month ago was I did a podcast with JTK Gaming and he asked me for a class tier list. And on the spot, I just kind of put something together and I thought it was pretty solid, but I didn't really think about it too in depth. There's some things that I would adjust. That screenshot got, or that list got posted around in different Discords and people had questions and everything. And I looked at it and I was like, you know what? I would make some adjustments, but I need to explain my reasoning for why I said what I said. And that's what this video is for, so that we can all argue and fight and get mad at each other on the internet, which is what the internet was created for. Not for knowledge, not for learning, not for figuring out new stuff. It's to fight with random people in comment sections. That's what this was designed for. No. In all seriousness, guys, I think this will be fun to talk about. And my video is going to be different than some of the tier lists, and I wanted to dive into that a little bit first before we get to the nitty gritty for it. This is for solo CP PvP, so just because this tier list is your favorite class, maybe lower than you think, it's just my thoughts on solo. We all have inherited bias. We all think different things because, you know, I'm stronger on some classes than I am on others, so I would prefer to play that class because I feel a little bit better on it. If I know that I'm weaker at a class, I will bring it up in this video. I will explain my reasoning, like, hey, I'm not very good at it, but I don't see other players running around solo. I don't see many people in Christopher's top 5 or just good clips running this class well like I do on other things. And so when I know that I'm lacking in some knowledge, I'll bring it up and then I'll explain some other reasoning outside of that. Now, like I said, solo PvP, CP campaign. On top of that, I need to be clear when I do this ranking system that there is some stuff. I know this is going to sound crazy to you guys. The current meta is really messed up. There's some ridiculous things going on in the current meta, okay? And so with this tier list, and, you know, it's not me, it's just tier lists that get passed around and they get discussed in the forums. The more people talk about classes and they, you know, if they see a tier list and they say, wow, this class is strong, there's no need for adjustments. That stuff happens all the time. And I think we can all acknowledge it in general that the way stuff gets adjusted is when people bitch about it. I think that's the number one way that things get adjusted right now. And so there's a big difference between a class being strong, functionally strong, regardless of meta, and there's a difference between that and a meta being off kilter, and because of one or two mechanics that a class has, in that specific meta, they're super strong, but outside of in any other meta, they wouldn't be very good. And so I would call those, the mathematical term would be outliers. Those are outlier builds. Currently they're strong. I will talk about those. I'll talk about where those specific builds line up in my opinion, but those classes are really crutching on specific mechanics right now that once things get adjusted and, you know, it's ESO, they won't exist like that anymore. And so when you say a class is super strong, would you really want to see the meta get adjusted and then those classes get nerfed even farther and they go from being like A tier because of their ability to abuse procs, and then procs disappear and they go to C tier and then they get nerfed on top of that and now they're a D tier class and unplayable? That's the goal with this video that I'm trying to avoid. And the perfect example that I'm talking about, before we die, this will be the last thing. In Scalebreaker, do you guys all remember the dot meta where everybody's running Soul Trap and Entropy and dotting you down at long range? You couldn't dodge it, you couldn't block it. What was the strongest class at that point? Magic Templar. Why? Well, they could apply dots like everybody else, but they had Extended Ritual where they could purify 5 dots. They were the most resistant to a dot meta. And for that reason, they were the strongest. 80% of people in PvP were running around on Templars and Scalebreaker. Now, was Templar a good class before that? Absolutely. Of course it was. It was a good class. I would give it a solid A. I thought Stamina Warden and Stamina Necromancer were probably a little bit better. Magsork was up there. Those classes were better in my opinion. But when that meta shifted and dots went crazy, classes that could defend against dots got stronger. And so I did a video back at that time and I said, hey, you know, Templars are really strong right now. The reason they're strong is because of dots. If dots get adjusted, Templar won't be the OP powerhouse that it currently is. And that's what happened. They nerfed dots, and Templar went back to, I mean, they still had their buggy things with purifying light and power of the light and everything, but they went from being like clear cut S++ tier, like that was one of the strongest specs in the game, was Scalebreaker level Templar, to a very good class, in my opinion, behind classes like Stamina Warden, Stamina Necromancer, Magsork. You know, like they dropped down quite a bit. Magsork and Scalebreaker was awful. It was absolutely awful because your shields got melted by dots immediately. You couldn't purge them. And yeah, once dots got adjusted, Magsorks came back a little bit and they were a little bit stronger afterwards. They went from being unplayable to, once again, you know, good like Magsork normally is. And so I'm using Scalebreaker as a reference because right now proc sets are extremely powerful. And some classes can abuse the shit out of proc sets. We know this. And so when I do these rankings, I'm going to say, hey, these classes can abuse the hell out of proc sets, but that's all they have. And so that's why I'm adjusting. That's why I'm labeling that. I'm going to talk about it, and I'm going to label it as an outlier and kind of talk about the class strengths and weaknesses and why I have them lower than where they have them. So that's my long-winded explanation. This is the tier list. I'll provide a timestamp in the section below just so you guys can avoid all this. Yeah, let's dive into it. Number one, we're going to go into S tier. Stamina Necromancer. Stamina Necromancer is so powerful. Yeah, it's top 2, not 2, in my opinion. Stamina Necromancer is so good. You can use Colossus. You could use Goliath. You can use Dawnbreaker. You can go bow in 2H. You can go sword and boar in 2H. You can go dual wield in 2H. It can abuse procs because it has a lot of healing with Mortal Coil. You have a lot of damage mitigation and healing coming in with Mortal Coil, Vigor, and Rally. And on top of that, you have damage mitigation with Spirit Guardian. And that allows you to abuse procs pretty well in this class. And so because procs are the strongest, being able to abuse procs is good. However, what sets Stamina Necromancer apart from the other classes is it doesn't matter what meta you're in. Stamina Necromancer is amazing. If you go to a dot meta like Scalebreaker, Stamina Necromancer is good because you have a class purge. If you want to go a burst-based meta, you can't burst much harder than Blast Bones, D-Swing, and Dawnbreaker. Like they have high tooltip burst. They're resistant to dots, 15% dot damage mitigation. They have 10% just flat damage mitigation. You have ultigen built into a few different skills. You have a class purge. The class just has everything that allows it to be flexible, and you can play Stamina Necromancer in so many different ways. You can run a dot-based spec and be effective. You can run a burst-based spec and be effective. You can run heavy armor. You can run medium armor. People ask me in my Discord, hey, what do you run on Stamina Necromancer? Fucking anything. You can run anything on a Stamina Necromancer, and it's so extremely powerful. You figure out what you want to run, you're going to have some success with it. Within reason, of course. You can't wear light Julianos on a medium armor or on a Stamplar or a Stamina Necromancer build, but yeah, most stam sets will actually be pretty effective. Now, in the S tier right there with it, Stamina Warden. AoE Burst. I mean, you could abuse procs as well with a health-based heal. Your Betty Netch is very powerful in that it gives you stamina sustain. It also gives you a purge of one ability at a time, which isn't a lot for outnumbered, but on some classes it is very annoying. Like when you're fighting a Magsork as a Warden and you have your Betty Netch up, you can purge their curse quite a bit, and so they can never really hit you with your full combo. So it makes you very resistant against some classes. It's a free to cast thing, so if you have a few things on you, you can just keep spamming the Betty Netch. But yeah, Arctic Blast and procs is very powerful, but you also have just AoE Burst. AoE Burst is fantastic. Sub Donnie, D-Swing sub, like you can point, you can get funnel people into a choke area. You can kill a ton of people on a Stamina Warden. So obviously, you can run more of an AoE-based spin-to-win build with 2H dual wield. You can run sword and board 2H. You could run bow 2H if you wanted. Obviously, bow isn't as popular this meta because of all the dots incoming. People prefer spell wall. But yeah, the class is good. You have access to a lot of major buffs built in. These are the top two. I don't think it's really debatable. If you think Stamina Necromancer is better, cool. If you think Stamina Warden's better, is cool. I think they're both right there. I think they're both right there for clear-cut S tier. Now, for A+ tier for me, Stamina Nightblade. Now, the reason I have Stamina Nightblade so high is because it's for solo 1vx. In group play, they drop. They drop a little bit in group play because they provide no support. But when you're rolling around playing solo, Stamina Nightblade has such a powerful defensive kit with Shadow Image and Cloak. Now, a lot of things pull you out of stealth right now with cloak. I have cloaked and somebody throws a javelin, that'll pull me out of stealth. Lightning heavies pull me out of stealth. There's a lot of things that currently pull you out of stealth defensively when you use cloak, but shadow image is so powerful. If you know how to use shadow image well, nightblade allows you to get in and out of spots that you just can't on other classes. And so for that reason, when you're playing against bad players that don't really know what they're doing, a nightblade is ridiculous at abusing bad groups. It's so powerful at abusing bad groups of players. Where the reason I have it lower than the other two classes above it is because if players are somewhat competent, its burst isn't as good. It's not. If I CC you with an incap, you can sometimes CC break and dodge roll or CC break and block the spectral bow. And so although the burst is good, it's not that the burst isn't as good because you can't land a blast bones and a D, like blast bones D swing or sub and D swing. You can land at the same time, at the exact same time, or you can land your ultimate with those two things at the exact same time. In-cap spec bow has a delay, and the delay is long enough to where you can react. If the game is working properly, you can react in that amount of time to stop yourself from getting hit. And so that's what holds this back for me. It's also single target versus AoE. Blast Bones AoE, Sub Assault's also AoE. You can AoE cleave people a little bit better. Nuke squishies quite a bit easier with those other two classes. Nightblade has a more kitey defensive kit. Avoiding damage is better. That's why I have it so high. But yeah, it's the ultimate pug stomper in my opinion. It's just against bad players, you can abuse people on a stamina Nightblade very, very easily. And so for 1vx, it's very good for that reason. Now, like I said, I put it a little bit lower than the other two for those reasons. It is a little bit resistant to procs in this meta due to cloak. If you shadow image away and you hit your vigor and you hit cloak, cloak will stop incoming proc damage, so it'll allow you to recover a little bit. You do have to be careful though, because like I said, cloak, a lot of things pull you out of stealth right now. That's what makes it a little bit rougher also, and that's why I put it just a little bit lower. As far as A tier with it, so I have Stamina Nightblade as A+. As an A, Stamsork. Stamsork's really powerful right now. It's really, really good. Ball Lightning and Hurricane, you have so much mobility on a Sork. On top of that, you don't necessarily have to run Malakath because you want to take advantage of Crit Surge. Those sorts of things for Outnumber 1vx are nice. The changes to Ball of Lightning really made Sorks in general a very powerful defensive kit. Streak has always been powerful, but the fact now that it's so cheap, it makes it really easy to be mobile on these classes. And it makes, for me, oftentimes on some specs when I'm fighting a Mag Sork or a Stam Sork, if they start streaking, I just don't even bother because I'm not going to be able to catch up. Like that's just how powerful their defensive kit is. They can get away from a lot of people for that reason. Even with a gap closer, sometimes you get caught on the Ball of Lightning and you can't get close enough. They're just that fast. On top of that, Crystal Blast is very, very bursty. It's also a little buggy in a good way for Stam Sorks. You can put out a shit ton of bursts with Crystal Blast right now. You can abuse procs pretty well on a Stam Sork. Things like, obviously next patch Unfathomable Darkness is getting fixed, but currently it scales with how much your Hurricane is doing, so you can abuse procs that way. Obviously you have things like Darkteal that allow you to build in a lot more damage because you get your sustain from things like Darkteal. Yeah, very, very good class, very mobile, high burst, high damage. A lot of different builds I've seen running around. All of them are pretty effective. So I'd put Stam Sork right here in the A tier. The next one, and I go back and forth on this one. I'd put Mag Sork in the current meta as A-, B+. And the only reason I have them so high, and it's an outlier, it's because of Ball Lightning. Ball Lightning is extremely powerful on a Mag Sork. It's really hard to kill a Mag Sork that doesn't want to die. Like if they decide that they want to get away from 2 or 3 people, they're probably going to get away from 2 or 3 people unless they're really sweaty and they really want to chase you down. Like it's really hard to keep up with a Mag Sork if they're running Torque of Total Constancy and they have Ball Lightning. Like it's just the way it is. It's just really, really tough to kill somebody like that if they don't want to die. And so their kit is amazing for that reason. Now, the reason I could see them being lower is they can't abuse procs like the other classes. They can't abuse procs the way stamina classes can. They don't have a very powerful. I mean, you run the Clan Fury, which is a health-based heal, but it's not super great. It's not as good as the other classes in my opinion. And the burst on Magsork, although it's solid in most metas, in the current meta where people are stacking a lot of health and they're just running around with proc sets, it's really hard to burst a lot of people into Magsork. Magsork has always been about curse, frag, mage's wrath, ult, you know, just timing everything, getting everything in a short window and bursting people down. Well, when you run across half the classes in the game have a purge now, or they're running with people with a purge, so a lot of your burst isn't going off. On top of that, due to game performance really holds Magsork back. I think because you need to rely on stacking shields to stay alive, and you need to land a burst combination perfectly. And so if anything lags or stutters, it's really, really frustrating to play Magsork and lag. And so I think if the game was working well, I would put them at an A-. Like if you're playing in the morning or during primetime hours, I think I would put them at A-. I don't think they're as good as the Stam classes because you can't abuse, I don't think you can abuse procs the same way that they can, because you lose some dip and some tankiness overall. But yeah, I could see them being lower due to the current performance. If the game was working better, I could potentially see them as a solid A. But a lot of what's holding them back is the current meta. You know, a lot of people are stacking procs. Their dots are a Sork's worst enemy. Well, one of them, outside of somebody else streaking right next to them. Your shield just can't stay up that well when you have 2 or 3 dot procs on you, and everybody's running around with freaking Savaras and Venomous Smite and a bunch of other just stuff. And so it's not super easy to play. So I can see this one being lower, but I have it at A- due to ball lightning. That's the main reason it's where it's at. So yeah, if you want to say you think it's B tier, I agree. I don't think I would put it any higher than A-. I don't think it's better than the Stam classes right now. When procs get adjusted, this probably jumps up a little bit, but yeah, that's where I put it right now. Now into the B tier. Let's have some fun. No, wait, hold on. We'll do that one next. B+, Magical Warden. Now, some people are going to see this list and they're going to go, really? Like, Magical Warden's really powerful right now because it can abuse procs because of health-based heals. And I agree with you. In the current meta, you can really abuse procs very, very well in a Magical Warden. Probably better than just about any class in the game. And it's up there. Magical Necromancer, Magical Warden, Stamina Necromancer, Stamina Warden. You can abuse those procs very, very well. The problem that Magical Warden has is you're very, very reliant on those procs to currently kill people in PvP. You lack a lot of top-end burst outside of those procs. If you imagine running a stat-based Magical Warden, it's actually quite tough. You don't have a class execute. Your survivability is amazing. Survivability is amazing. You do have some mobility. You have a lot of things that make you tanky, but your offensive kit's just a little bit lacking. And so when you look at proc sets that you can run on a Magical Warden, a lot of the really good ones like Icy Conjurer are dots. And if you're trying to 1v4 or 1v5 a group that has a healer, you're going to have a hard time with it. Because, yeah, although that in no CP, I would put this class quite a bit higher. I would put this class in the A tier, possibly even the S tier for no CP 1vx or no CP Battlegrounds. In Battlegrounds, I think Magical Warden is way, way up there. I think it's amazing in no CP Battlegrounds and in no CP. But in CP, some of the things that it's really relying on aren't as powerful. And yeah, its top end burst isn't as great. And so I think it's a good class. I do. But I think it's very reliant on Arctic Blast being a health-based heal, and the proc sets being as powerful as they are. Like I said, if you try to run a stat-based Magical Warden, I think you could argue that it would go even lower than what it currently is, where I currently have it. So I put it as a B+ for solo outnumbered PvP because, yeah, they can abuse procs pretty well. In the B tier, Stam DK. Now, Stam DK is the most polarizing class in the entire tier list for me because some people think it's S tier. Some people think, and that's fine. You know, I'm not here judging other people's tiers or anything like that. We're on different platforms, guys. Like some platforms have better, you have different metas. And when you are dealing with different metas, you adjust in different ways. And so if everybody's running around with certain specs, some classes aren't going to be as powerful. And so some people say Stam DK is S tier, and some people say Stam DK is the worst class in the game. I've heard both. And in my opinion, or actually it's not my opinion, I was listening to this video, and it was an instructor in the job that I'm in, and he was talking about feedback from people. And he goes, yeah, you know, if they present you with a problem and everybody's commenting, and you have half the people that say this thing's clearly the right thing to do this, and if the other half of people are like, it's clearly the right thing to do this, and they're two different things, it probably means that it's a tough decision. And so if, by that logic, if a lot of people think Stam DK is S tier or really, really good, best class in the game, and other people think that Stam DK is worst class in the game, it's around average. And the reason I have it around average is Stam DK can't abuse procs the way other classes can. You kind of sit there and eat all the dot damage. You can't purge it, which makes it a little bit rougher to deal with. What Stam DK has is leap. That's what they have. Their class spammable sucks. I'm sorry. For those of you guys, all 4 of you running Poop Rock, spammable is not very good. It just isn't. And so your spammable isn't very good. Your class dots are pretty solid with Malakath. Your class dots are pretty solid. Major Mending got a nerf to 10%. And so you don't heal like you used to. You take a lot of dot damage right now. You can't abuse procs the way a Stamina Warden or a Stamina Necromancer can. You're not as resistant to dots in the same way Stamina Nightblade are. You can't get out the way Stamina Nightblade and Stam Sword can. But what you do have is leap. And so if you can somehow get somebody to 60, 70% health and you leap on them, it's currently buggy to where if they don't block, or if their block doesn't work and you CC them, you're guaranteed a follow-up. That's what happens with leap. If you CC somebody with leap, you're guaranteed a follow-up. So it's not just the leap that's hitting hard, it's the follow-up execute that you hit afterwards. And so if you get them in that 70, 60% range, you leap on them, you take 30 to 40% of their health, you execute, they're dead. This is a leap class. Luckily, leap is one of the strongest ultimates in the game. It is. And so it hits very hard. So you can do things like that. On my Stam DK, I've run Sword and Board in 2H. I've run Bow in 2H. I dot people down. Once I see them around 70% health, I leap on them, I execute them, and I move on to the next person. And so it really hinges on leap. Now, in no CP, I put this quite a bit lower because, like I said, it can't abuse procs the way the other classes can. It's not mobile. It can't escape a bunch of procs dotting it down. You just sit there and you take procs until you die when you're fighting outnumbered in no CP. But in CP, you're a little bit more resistant because you have a little bit better healing. You have a little bit better damage mitigation. And yeah, for pug slaying, leap is fantastic. You AoE leap on a pile. If 1 or 2 people are squishy, you're going to figure out who that is and you're going to take them out pretty quickly. And so that's why I have it where it's at. I think it's a solid B tier. I think the class could use some buffs. I really do. I think the spammable needs to be reworked entirely. Let's get rid of Poop Rock. Let's get Poison Whip, please. This is what the community wants. We all want it. We want Poison Whip, please. Please, early 2021 Christmas gift, give us Poison Whip on Stam DK. We'll forget Poop Rock ever happened. Just, you know, it's a sunk cost. Nobody likes Poop Rock. Poop Rock's not fun. It's not a good spammable. You invested money in it. Quit investing money into it. Quit polishing the turd that it is. Just scrap it and do it again. Please, just do it again. It's a shit spammable. I shouldn't have to keep saying this. Everybody knows it's shit. Why does it still exist? I'm sorry. Give us Poison Whip, please. But yeah, Stam DK could probably use some buffs. In my opinion, A tier is where I want to see classes. A tier is where classes are fun, but they have a couple of weaknesses. And by that vein, Stam Crow and Stamina Warden need to be brought down a little bit. All these other classes need to be brought up a little bit. And so that's what I would do for Stam DK to bring it up and in line with the other classes. Into the B- tier, Stamina Templar. Now, a little bit below Stam DK in my opinion. I play Stam DK a little bit better. If you want to say Stamina Templar is better, that's fine, because they have Purify and current procs are mostly dots. If you want to say Stamplar is better, I get it. But you probably play Stamplar better than I do, and you probably play Stamplar better than you play Stam DK. But I think they're close. I think these are close. If you want to argue one over the other, that's fine. Stamina Templar, in my opinion, is the worst stamina class in the game. But it's still a stamina class. And when you're playing outnumbered 1vx PvP, I value burst over dots because, yeah, If the group has a healer, which just about every group in the game does, you want to be able to 100 to 0 somebody as quickly as possible. You're going to do that with procs, or you're going to do that with burst. And so you can do it with procs too. But yeah, stamina classes in general burst harder than magicka classes. Now, this, like I said, this is for solo PvP. In group play, all the magicka classes come up. But yeah, this is where I have it. I have it in the B minus range, just a little bit behind Stam DK. As far as buffs go, Power of the Light, it needs a buff, in my opinion. It got nerfed because of the amount of damage it was doing. I think it should come up a little bit. I know the stamina one does a little bit more damage than Purifying Light, but still, like, it's overall just kind of lacking. The Burning Light nerf impacted this class quite a bit. Yeah, and not for the better. Yeah, I could see this class getting a couple buffs to bring it up. B minus, Mag DK. Mag DK honestly feels pretty good to me right now. You do lack some top end burst in order to finish opponents in this current tanky meta. That's why I have it a little bit lower. The buffed Coagulating Blood was fantastic. That was a fantastic buff to the class because you can invest a little bit less recovery. Because you don't have to spam heal as much. You don't need as much recovery because you just heal for a little bit better. The healing feels very, very nice. Burst, Magicka Dragonknight Leap and stuff doesn't hit in the same way Stamina Dragonknight Leap does. If you look at all these classes and you compare the Stamina versus Magicka burst kits, like Ferocious Leap versus Take Flight, it's not even close. Mag DK's burst isn't as good. They do have dots, but like I said, if you're running across a group where they have a healer and they're running a couple hots, they're going to negate your dots really quickly. So for 1vx, I'm not saying it's bad. I give it a B minus, guys. A lot of us have passed classes with way worse than a B minus. Okay, so I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying I would rather have these classes over it. It could use a few more buffs. I think Take Flight could use, or Ferocious Leap could use a little bit more damage. I feel like the Molten Whip could get buffed a little bit more. Those sorts of things, just little things around the edges. Maybe 10% more damage to Ferocious Leap, maybe 5 to 10% more damage to like the Whip. Dot damage is okay, maybe 5% more dot damage, something like that, just to bring it a little bit. And you know, when we can start talking solid B plus tier, it can abuse procs pretty well. Mag DK currently can, so that's why I have it here. A lot of fun this patch. Mag DK has been one of the more fun classes I've had. And in group play, this class is fantastic. It's so good in group play. Now, on to the final three. And the first one we're going to start with, Magicka Necromancer at C+. This class is really good right now. And I know some people are going to get really mad at me when I say this, when I have it at this low. But the only reason it's good is because procs are good. That's the only reason this class is currently good. Stat-based Magicka Necromancer just isn't that effective. And the reason that is because your offensive kit's really disjointed. And I'm going to explain why right now. Boneyard, the synergy, anybody with a half a brain is not going to walk in your Boneyard. And so it's a real pain in the ass to try and fight 2, 3, 4 people when they're just constantly moving around your Boneyard. Blast Bones is drunk sometimes and doesn't always land when you need it to. So if you want to try and run burst with Blast Bones on a Magicka spec, first of all, it hits like half as hard on most specs as Stamina Blast Bones does. I've seen some Blast Bones hit really hard on Magicka Necromancers, but in general, Magicka Necromancer Blast Bones just doesn't hit as hard as Stamina, in my opinion. And so because your burst is lower, it's a little bit tougher to deal with. Now, they do have 15% more dot damage, making them a really good dot class. If you guys go back and you look at my channel, I have a dot crow build for no CP. It's fantastic. In no CP, Magicka Necromancer, in my opinion, is S tier. It's really good right now. But part of the reason it's good is because of Black Rose Destro and the new Vatishran's Destro. They're both dots, and they both get buffed by Necromancer passives. If those things get adjusted or they get yeeted to where they're not valuable anymore, you have disjointed Blast Bones with weird-ass Boneyard, with no execute. Your survivability is fantastic on a Necromancer. It is. It's really, really good, and that's why I can abuse procs. But its offensive kit is really struggling compared to other specs. You don't have a class execute. You don't have these sorts of things. So I put it at C+, because, yeah, if you run some procs on a Magicka Necromancer right now, it's really good. Goliath is fantastic. But I put it a lot lower here because in CP, those dots don't shred as much as they do in no CP. Like I said, no CP, clearly S tier. In a group, this is one of the best classes in the game. And so I'm not saying that the class is bad. I'm just saying for solo 1vx, it's a little rough, in my opinion. Also, I don't play a ton of Magic and Necromancer. And so I have it down here because I don't play it a ton. I don't have a ton of experience. I'm not super good at the class. I don't even think I'm good at the class. And so some of this coming in is my experience. On top of that, I don't see many people playing solo Magic and Necromancer. Like Christopher's top 5, which isn't the best example. I think there's only been 1 or 2 people that have posted Magic and Necromancer clips. I only know of like 1 or 2 people on Xbox that play solo Magic and Necromancer. There's just not many. That was what I'm trying to say. And so if there's not many, it's probably because it's not very good in that environment. Doesn't mean the class is bad. It just means that it's a little bit disjointed. So yeah, that's why I have it that low. C, Magic and Templar. Let's talk about it. This class got gutted. It got gutted with the Burning Light nerfs, which were needed. I don't like proc passives. It should get some other things. This class needs a lot of buffs. The Burning Light nerfs were needed, but it needed to be buffed in a different way. RNG procs are just bullshit. And so I understand that. Burning Light got nerfed, and then Purifying Light got nerfed, and they gutted Purifying Light. I was testing it a couple days ago, and I was running around, like I was just testing a build. I just wanted to see if it was worth investing into Purifying Light, as an example. And so I had 38,000 Magicka. The highest I got my Purifying Light to hit for was like 4,300 on somebody with 30,000 resistances. You can obviously get more max Magicka, but even then, like you're hoping for a 5k crit or just a 5k damage Purifying Light. There's no burst there. And so they took care of they got rid of the burst on Purifying Light. A lot of the dots, Magicka based dots, don't hit that hard. Vampire's Bane sucks. It sucks for a dot. It's like 9k damage over 10 seconds. It's by far one of the worst class dots in the game. It could definitely use a buff. Also, the class has 10% more crit damage in a meta where everybody's running Malakath. And so that passive just doesn't mean shit right now. It just really doesn't. And so you combine all these things on top of people running around with potentially things like Major Evasion, and you're spammable as AoE, so you get a lot of damage mitigation in that way. I was running around on a 5,000 spell damage Magicka Templar, and there were some people I was still hitting 900, 1,200 jabs on, or sweeps on, sorry. And so when you have 5,000 spell damage, which is hard to get, and you're built glass cannon and you're just still lacking damage to kill a lot of people, it's just, you don't have burst, you don't have dots. Like you have survivability with Honor the Dead and Breath of Life and Purify, but your offensive kit just is struggling. You can't abuse procs the way the other Magicka classes do. You don't have a health based heal in the same way that Magicka Warden does. You can't get away in the same way that Magicka Sort can. You don't have as much burst as a Mag DK, which is fucking crazy for me to say. It's just not in a great spot. Now, when you're in a duo, trio, or in a group, this jumps up quite a bit. I think this is one of the better classes to play in small scale outnumbered. You provide so much group utility. A lot of those things are really mitigated in a group. Where Magicka Templar has always struggled in solo PvP, in solo, is going from your back bar, playing defense on your back bar, and getting off combinations on your front bar. You really need to have that burst window to really take people out. And before, I used to be able to build tanky enough to where I'd still hit 10 to 15k crescent sweeps with Purifying Light hitting for 10k plus, and that would be my burst window. So I'd burst people down and I go back to my back bar, go to healing, misform around a corner, hit the next person with a burst combination. I'd be able to burst people down, but the class has always struggled going from back bar to front bar. That's just the issue with the class. But now that your burst is so neutered, you just like, it's just not as good for 1vx. I still have it as a C. Like, C's get degrees. Everybody, like, people have heard this. Like, you can do it. I'm not saying that the class is shit. Classes in general right now are better than they were a year ago. But I think right now for solo CP, it's one of the worst classes in the game. The defensive kit is fantastic. You have a full offensive kit, but the offensive kit isn't super good for solo. For 2vx or 3vx, Radiant is fantastic, and so you can really do some damage in a 2 or 3, 4-man group. And so, yeah, in that environment, I shoot it up a lot higher, put it A tier. I think it's a lot better in that environment, but for solo, not so good in my opinion. And then finally, C-, Magic and Nightblade. No burst heal. Because there's no burst heal, you have to stack a lot of defensive abilities. You have to stack a ton of defensive abilities, multiple heal over times. Because you're stacking so many defensive abilities, it means you can't stack as many offensive abilities as you can in other specs. Think about, like, if you play stand-up Magic and Nightblade, think about how many defensive skills you have, and then think about another Magicka or Stamina spec and how many more offensive skills you can fit. Typically, it's 1 or 2 more. And those things make a pretty big difference. And so Magic and Nightblade is just a weaker version of Stamina Nightblade right now. Your Soul Harvest doesn't hit as hard as Incap. Your Soul Harvest doesn't knock people down. Your Spectral Bow doesn't hit as hard as Incap. But the difference between Stamina and Magic and Nightblade is Incap knocks people down. Incap, you can guarantee a follow-up more consistently on a Stamina Nightblade than you can on a Magic and Nightblade because they only have 1 global cooldown to deal with it. When I hit somebody with a Soul Harvest, if I go for the Spectral Bow, more often than not, they're either block healing before the Spectral Bow lands, or they're CC break dodge rolling before the Spectral Bow lands. And so the burst isn't as good. The burst is easy to avoid. You can't fit other skills you can't fit other many damage over time effects or other things like an execute to compensate for it. It makes a great bomber in like large scale PvP. Magic and Nightblades are running around as Hemps quite a bit. It's very strong in that environment. Very, very strong in that environment. But for a solo stand-up build, even for melee gank specs, so many things pull you out of stealth right now. So if you're relying on Cloak to play defensively, it's not going to work super well. Yeah, I mean, you can gank with it. You can bomb with it. But for 1vx, I don't think it's super good. Now, it can't abuse procs the way the other classes can. Their health-based heal is Dark Cloak, but you can't scale it in the same way you can Arctic Blast or other things like that. And so I have it a lot lower for that reason. All those reasons that I just mentioned are why it's so low. Now, what would I do to make this class better? Give it a health-based heal. The bargain with health, like sacrifice your health to heal somebody else, make that the health-based heal for Magic and Nightblades. And get rid of cast times and ultimates. You get rid of cast times and ultimate, Magic and Nightblade all of a sudden jumps up a little bit. You do those 2 things, and Magic and Nightblade jumps up at least a half a grade. It may be a little bit more. Maybe in a new meta, Magic and Nightblade would go up a little bit higher. But yeah, it needs some love in a few different ways. Yeah, but overall, this is my tier list. I've already, like I said, it's for solos PvP. A lot of the mag specs and group play, they all jump higher. Yeah. In group play environments, I value mag specs over most stam. Like if I'm playing with my buddy Blap, obviously Stamina Necromancer, Stamina Warden are really, really good. But then once we get past those 2 classes, I take most mag specs over the following stam specs. So when you get to a duo or trio, which is what most people play in a group. There's not many people playing solo. And so these are my opinions as a solo player on what I value the most. Stamina kind of reigns supreme for solo PvP. Like I said, once you start getting into duo or trio, this tier list flip-flops basically. Like not fully, but a lot of stamina drops in those environments. So yeah, that's gonna be the end of this video. I'm gonna leave it here. I explained my reasoning on the class. If you disagree, we disagree. Provide your reasoning below. We'll have a fun discussion about it. Yeah, thank you for watching, guys. Have a nice day.